My true story from Nevada. At 70, I said I wanted love again. My drunk son called me scrap, no one wants. So I cleaned the house and took out the real trash. Dinner was roast chicken. I had marinated it with rosemary and lemon the night before, hoping to bring some warmth to the table. The children liked it that way, or at least they used to. I placed the dish in the center of the table, poured water into everyone's glass, and sat down quietly. I wiped my hands on my apron and looked at them. My son James, his wife Amanda, and their 3 children. They barely glanced at me. I cleared my throat gently. I want someone to sit beside me too. You all have someone to love. I want that too, I said, careful not to raise my voice. James stopped mid-chew. Amanda put down her fork with a clink. Silence stretched longer than it should have. Amanda was the first to speak. Julia from next door just got engaged, she said, not looking at me, but at her phone. Lucky woman. Her mother-in-law died years ago, no drama. James laughed and tapped his fork against his whiskey glass. Everyone, silence please. Our dear old mother is lonely. If anyone knows a widower who's lost his eyesight, memory, and dignity, we've got a hot one right here. 70 years old and looking for love. She still has most of her teeth. The children laughed. Even the youngest, who did not fully understand the joke, laughed, because everyone else did. Amanda finally looked me in the eye. Do you really think you deserve love, Mom? Or are you just trying to dress up your loneliness as some romantic fantasy? I stood slowly. My hands trembled, but my voice did not. I used to think having children meant I would have someone to lean on when I got old. I didn't realize I had raised people who would rather see me crawl. I didn't know I was raising people who look at their mother and see a dog in a wig. No one said a word as I cleared the dishes. Not one thank you. Not one apology, just the clinking of silverware and the sound of them going back to their plates as if I had not just spilled the last of my hope into the air. Later that evening, I was folding laundry in the guest room when I noticed a manila envelope on the dresser. It was out of place. Amanda never left anything untidy. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a copy of the house deed. My house. The name at the top was mine, as it had always been, but attached to it was a document I had never signed, a transfer of ownership form. The date was from last week. The signature, a crude attempt at mimicking mine. I stared at it. My name, forged in blue ink. Neat enough to fool a distracted clerk, but not me. Not the woman who had signed that name on homework sheets, checks, permission slips, and tax forms for over 40 years. There was a typed checklist clipped to the back. Amanda's formatting. Bullet points. Get Mom to sign by end of month. Use the kids need security angle. If she refuses, talk to Gary about incompetency. Filing incompetency. Filing for mental incompetency. I sat down. My heart did not race. My hands did not shake. Everything inside me went still. This was not about love, not about care. This was extraction. They wanted the house. They wanted me gone. I closed the envelope and slipped it beneath my sweater. I walked back into the kitchen and scrubbed the dishes as if nothing had happened. Amanda was on the phone with her sister, laughing. James had passed out in the recliner. The television cast a flickering blue glow across his face. I looked at them, the people I had fed, clothed, forgiven, and I thought, so this is what it feels like to be buried while still breathing. After Robert died, the house fell silent in a way that crept into my bones. The mornings were the worst. I would sit at the kitchen table, listening to the ticking of the wall clock and wondering what to do with so much time and no one to cook for, no socks to pick up, no voice calling from the garage for a wrench or a coffee. After 42 years of marriage, the quiet was not peace. It was punishment. So when James asked if he and Amanda could move in with the kids, I said yes, without a pause. I told myself it would be a blessing, a full house, laughter again, toys scattered on the floor, and tiny socks to wash. I imagined myself as the warm presence in the kitchen, the one who knew how to comfort a teething baby, who could fix torn pajamas and tell bedtime stories better than YouTube ever could. At first it was almost like that. The kids ran up and down the hallway, giggling. Amanda baked cookies on Sundays. James brought home groceries and told me I did not have to cook if I did not want to. I still did, of course. Cooking had always been my way of showing love. I made meatloaf and roast chicken, banana bread and apple pie. I made memories. I thought we were building something together, a new chapter. I truly believed a house full of family meant a house full of life, but then the details began to change. Amanda started calling decisions house matters and made them without me. First it was the curtains, then the thermostat, then the color of the guest bathroom. I was not consulted, I was simply informed. We went with eggshell white, she said, handing me a paint chip like it mattered. James no longer brought home groceries unless they were on his own list. I still cooked, but fewer people came to the table. The children started asking if they could eat in the living room. Amanda said yes without asking me. She started calling the shots on the garden, too. The rose bush Robert had planted for our 25th anniversary was cut back one day, without a word. I came outside and saw it in pieces on the compost pile. When guests visited, Amanda transformed. She would touch my shoulder gently and say, "This is Ma. She's such a help with the kids, insists on it. We keep telling her to rest, but she just loves being involved." I would smile and nod, because that is what you do when you are being praised in front of strangers. But when the guests left and the door closed, the warmth vanished. One evening, after a long day of cleaning up after the kids, Amanda muttered as she passed me in the hallway, "Rags that move still stink." She did not say it to my face. She did not need to. The words were meant to stick. I heard James on the phone one night. I had brought him a cup of coffee. He did not see me standing in the doorway. "She's not sick. She's just old, stubborn. Amanda's been patient, but it's wearing thin. I mean, she doesn't really do anything." I held the cup until it burned my palm. Then I turned and left. One night, I overheard Amanda say, "We should look into a facility, somewhere we can visit twice a year and not feel bad." They spoke of me as if I were a couch with stuffing coming out, something you hold on to only until the trash pickup is scheduled. Even the children changed. They stopped saying good morning unless prompted. They rolled their eyes when I asked how their day went. I went from bedtime storyteller to background noise. My presence shrank. My rocking chair was moved to the garage to make space. My needlework basket was tucked into a closet. The framed photo of Robert and me on the hallway wall disappeared, replaced with a canvas print of Amanda's family motto, "Work hard, love harder." No one asked me, no one told me. I had let myself become a guest in my own home. I told myself they were just tired. Raising kids is hard. Marriage is stressful. Amanda had her hands full. James worked long hours. Maybe they just forgot how to say thank you. Maybe they didn't mean it, but deep down I knew better. Because you do not treat guests with contempt. You do not call someone Ma in front of your friends and baggage when they cannot hear you. I wanted to believe that love could return if I was patient enough. That Amanda would remember the hours I sat beside her in the hospital when she gave birth. That James would recall the day I stayed up all night sewing his Halloween costume because we could not afford the one he wanted. But memories, it seems, only serve those who choose to keep them alive. One afternoon, as I sat in the garden with my hands in the dirt, I realized I could name every flower in the yard. I had planted them all, watered them, pruned them. I had made this place bloom. And yet, in their eyes, I was just the old woman in the back room. They thought they were letting me stay, as if this house was theirs, as if my roots here meant nothing, as if I had not built it, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, with the man I loved and buried. No, they were not letting me stay. I had let them stay. And that mistake was about to be corrected. I began keeping a journal the day I realized my name was being erased, quietly, bit by bit, from the life I built. I wrote in it at night, sitting at my desk with the door locked and the window cracked open, just enough to let the cool air keep me grounded. At first, it was just phrases, Amanda's muttered insults, James's tired sighs when I spoke, the way the kids flinched when I offered to help with homework, as if I were some ghost hovering too close. But the words alone weren't enough. Words are deniable. So I turned to something firmer. I bought 2 small cameras online, using a prepaid card I registered in a fake name. I had to walk to the library and ask the young man at the front desk how to order things anonymously. He looked at me like I was senile. I let him think that. It worked in my favor. The cameras arrived in a plain brown box, no label, no markings. One went in the hallway, tucked discreetly in the air vent. The second I slipped behind a row of cookbooks in the kitchen. I dusted those books twice a week. Amanda never touched them. I knew they would stay safe. At night, I would watch the recordings on a flash drive I kept in the back of my old sewing kit. What I saw didn't surprise me, but it did solidify everything I had feared. 1 week in, I caught Amanda opening the drawer in my bedroom where I kept my old coin envelopes. She did it quickly, glancing behind her, pulling out a $100 0-cent bill, folding it into her bra. No guilt, no hesitation. Later that day, she told James she'd found it in the laundry. I wrote down the timestamp. Another evening, James came into the kitchen after I had gone to bed. He poured himself a drink and sat at the table with Amanda. I watched them later, their faces lit by the dim oven light, voices low but sharp. "She won't sign," Amanda said, tapping her nails against the glass. "I've asked twice." "She'll fold," James replied. "She's just being dramatic." "She's not stupid, James. She knows something's up." "Then we push harder. The kids can guilt her. She hates upsetting them. We just need that signature. Then we can sell the house, pay off the loans, move out. She's not going to live forever." Amanda swirled her wine. "She's already a shadow. What difference does it make?" They toasted right there over my countertop, like co-conspirators, like vultures congratulating each other for circling something that hadn't even stopped breathing yet. I paused the video. My breath stayed even. My hand did not shake. Because this was no longer neglect. This was an operation, a strategy. And I had let it form under my roof. The journal became a ledger. Not just words, but evidence. Date, time, location, screenshot from the recording. Quote, "She's just a shadow. She won't live forever. Get her to sign. Push harder." And then, a week later, the most damning footage of all. James, pacing the hallway outside my room. "Look, if she doesn't sign, we file for guardianship. Say she's forgetful, unstable. I've been documenting weird behavior. You know that time she left the stove on? I have it on my phone." Amanda, sitting on the stairs, replying, "What if she fights it? What if she gets a lawyer?" James shook his head. "She won't. You know how she is. Too proud. Too quiet. That's her weakness. Always has been." And that was the moment I realized he hadn't seen me in years, not really. He saw an old woman, silent, fragile, alone. What he did not see was what silence had taught me. That silence is space, it is observation. It is the most powerful room in the house because it hears everything and it forgets nothing. That weekend, I tested the waters. I left an envelope marked property tax in plain sight. It was empty. Amanda took it, didn't ask. I found it in her purse 2 days later with a post-it attached. "Need to get her to sign soon." I smiled. They were greedy. Greed makes people reckless, sloppy. I began preparing quietly. I moved my important documents into a fireproofed lockbox. I transferred what money I had into a separate credit union. I called Robert's lawyer, Henderson, and asked him to lunch. He was older now, but still sharp. I showed him the footage, the forged signature, the journal. He didn't say much, just nodded and asked me how far I wanted to go. "All the way," I said. "I want them out." He leaned back and exhaled. "Then you're going to need to be very, very patient. But I think they've made that easier for you." He gave me a list of next steps, a checklist of my own. Mine didn't include manipulation or lies. Mine included locks, legal documentation, and survival. That night, I watched the camera footage again. Not because I needed more proof. I had enough to bury them in court. But because I wanted to see what they looked like when they thought no one was watching. They looked like strangers. Amanda, smug and composed. James, impatient and bitter. My son. The boy who used to cry when I left the room. Who used to bring me wildflowers and call me his best girl. Now he was preparing to erase me for the square footage of a property I bought with Robert's second job and my saved grocery coupons. I didn't cry. I watched. And I waited. Because when people mistake silence for weakness, they forget the one rule that has kept women like me alive for generations. The quietest person in the room is the one who remembers everything, and I was about to remind them. It started with a sudden rush of courtesy. That was my first warning. Amanda began bringing me coffee in the mornings. Weak, with too much cream, just the way she thought I liked it. James started asking how I was sleeping. He called me Ma again, like he used to when he needed money for summer camp. They waited 2 days after Amanda stole the envelope before they tried again, this time with fake warmth stitched into every word. "Ma," James said one afternoon, "we were thinking it might be good to organize things. You know, in case something happens, we want to make sure everything's in order." He said it with that half-smile I had grown to hate, the one that meant he was pretending to ask while really giving an order. Amanda chimed in. "We found a wonderful lawyer downtown who helps seniors manage their assets. Just some paperwork, nothing urgent, just to keep things smooth." I looked at them. The last time they were this polite was when Amanda was 2 payments behind on her student loans and James wanted to use my name to co-sign for a car. Still, I nodded. "Of course," I said. "It's good to be prepared." That Friday they drove me to the office of a man named Garrett Todd. His office smelled like carpet cleaner and desperation. James chatted with the receptionist. Amanda clutched a folder in her lap like it was the 10 Commandments. Inside, Garrett offered me a leather seat and too many reassurances. "It's just about clarity," he said as he flipped open the folder. "Protecting your wishes." He handed me a pen. The signature line waited for me, wide and ready. But I had seen this document before. Not the exact one, but the version Amanda had tried to hide. This was a new printout, reworded just enough, but the intent was the same. Transfer of title, consolidation of authority. My name slowly phased out of ownership in favor of joint management with James. My eyes skimmed over the paragraphs. I traced the curve of the forged signature Amanda had practiced. I glanced at the line where my real signature was supposed to go. I looked up. "Would you mind if I brought this home?" I asked sweetly. "I like to read things more than once." Garrett blinked. "Well, it's just a standard. I said I'd like to read it at home." There was a silence, a pause. Amanda's nails tapped against her coffee cup. James shifted in his seat. "Sure," Garrett said finally, and slid it into a folder for me. On the way home, James was quiet. Amanda stared out the window. I smiled. The next morning, I called Mr. Henderson. He was 79 now, almost completely deaf in one ear and sharp as a blade. He'd handled Robert's will, the purchase of the house, the life insurance policies, and the trust we had quietly opened for the grandchildren's future. When I told him what had happened, he didn't interrupt. He simply asked for the names, the documents, and the time to work quietly. "I don't want to fight," I told him. "I don't want a court case. I want them to know they picked the wrong woman to play dumb with." Henderson chuckled. "Revenge is better when served in silence. Let's keep it legal and lethal." We started with the accounts. I moved my pension into a separate institution. I redirected the automatic deposits from Social Security. I closed the joint emergency savings James had talked me into opening for house repairs. Next came the documents. Henderson updated the deed to reflect a living trust, with me as the sole trustee. We ensured that no transfer could happen without notarized dual approval, mine and a court witness. The house was locked in. Then we wrote up a formal cease and desist letter regarding any misrepresentation of my assets. I did not send it. I kept it tucked in my drawer, dated and signed in case they ever tried again. I also updated my will. I removed James and Amanda as beneficiaries. The grandchildren remained, but not through their parents. I created a third-party educational trust to be administered by Henderson's firm. If they wanted money, they would have to go back to school. Otherwise, they got nothing. Every night I logged my progress. The journal was now part diary, part war record. My handwriting steadied, my heart beat calmly. I was doing what I had spent a lifetime avoiding, fighting back. But I did it my way, quietly, thoroughly. James and Amanda, meanwhile, were patient. They kept being kind. They brought me flowers. Amanda offered to take me to the salon. James told me he'd handle the bills this month. I let them. I played my part until I was ready. Because I didn't need an audience. I didn't need a courtroom. I didn't need to raise my voice or slam a door. I just needed them to realize what it feels like to stand in front of someone you thought was weak and discover they were never yours to manipulate in the first place. I was not confused. I was not old and useless. I was simply tired of pretending I didn't see, and soon They would see too. The house was quiet after midnight. I moved like a shadow, the way Amanda always said I did, like a ghost, too soft to notice until you realized something was missing. This time it was my permission that was missing. And they would feel it soon. In the hallway closet, I pulled down 2 large suitcases, ones they had brought with them when they moved in all those years ago, when this house was meant to be their safe place, their sanctuary. I laid them open on the floor, unzipped their mouths wide, and started to pack. Amanda's silk blouses, the ones she never folded properly. James's dress shirts, still with the plastic collar stays from discount stores. I packed without rushing, without hate, only precision. I packed each piece like I was folding a memory I no longer needed to keep. In the guest bathroom, I emptied drawers into a large Ziploc. Razors, pills, that overpriced facial serum Amanda claimed was her retirement plan in a bottle, all of it. Downstairs, I printed 3 things. First, the letter. I had spent 2 weeks writing it. Not angry, not emotional, just facts, structured like legal testimony, wrapped in maternal exhaustion. It began, "To my son and his wife, the food you ate I made, the clothes you wore I helped buy, the roof over your head I built it, with the man you never cried for after he died." Second, a full financial breakdown, every dollar I had given, every loan gifted, every medical bill I had paid for Amanda's mother, every deposit I had made into their children's accounts. Highlighted in yellow, $82,430.00. That number had once been love. Now it was evidence. Third, screenshots from the camera footage. James's face as he said, "She won't live forever." Amanda's smirk as she replied, "She's already a shadow." And the frame where she stuffed the envelope into her purse. I printed them all. I slid the documents into clear plastic sleeves and placed them neatly on the dining room table, beside a pot of fresh coffee I had brewed like any other morning. Habit is hard to kill. So is care. Then I sat in the living room with the lights off and the TV muted, watching them sleep on the security monitor. James's leg dangling off the couch, Amanda curled in the fetal position. I thought for a moment about calling it off. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I had misunderstood something. Maybe, somewhere in the layers of greed and disrespect, there had been love. Then I heard it. A voice, soft but sharp. Emma, my oldest grandchild, 14, smart, too observant for her age. She was whispering to her younger brother in the dark, unaware that the baby monitor in the hallway picked up everything. "I hope Grandma doesn't make it to Christmas," she said. "Like jumps or something. A train, maybe. If she's gone, the house is ours. That's all she's worth anymore." The boy giggled. "You think she'd do it?" "She's old, sad. They said old people get depressed. That's why they're being nice to her. Just wait it out." I pressed pause on the monitor. My finger hovered over the button. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even move. I just knew. This was no longer a home. It was a battlefield, and I was the only one unarmed, by choice. I stood up and walked to the hallway, pressed my hand against the wallpaper that Robert had installed himself, one crooked panel that I never fixed because it reminded me of his clumsy charm. Then I returned to the suitcases. I added James's old baseball glove, Amanda's engagement photo, the one she insisted be framed and hung in the hall. I included them not out of sentiment, but as a message. I know what you value, and I am returning it all to you. Before dawn, I moved the suitcases to the front porch. It was chilly outside. I liked that. The cold reminds you you're still alive. I brewed another pot of coffee and stood by the window. I watched the sky change from navy to purple to pale gold. I thought about the day I brought James home from the hospital, wrapped in a blanket, smelling like talcum powder and new beginnings. I thought about Amanda's wedding day, how I stitched her veil when the real one didn't arrive on time. I had given them more than a house. I had given them a foundation, and now I was going to reclaim it. I poured the coffee into 2 mugs and set them on the dining table, right next to the envelope. Then I unlocked the front door, turned on the hallway light, and waited. At 7:08 a.m., I heard the bedroom door creak open. At 7:10, James entered the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. He saw the mugs first, then the papers. Amanda followed, robe tied tightly, suspicion already creeping across her face. "What's all this?" she asked. I didn't answer. I walked past them, out the front door, and pointed to the suitcases. I said I'd clean the house, I said. Trash day came early. James sputtered. You're insane. You can't do this. I reached into my cardigan pocket, pulled out the spare key, and dropped it at his feet. Watch me. Amanda's mouth opened, then closed. Emma appeared at the doorway, her eyes still half asleep. None of them moved to help each other. I had expected rage, maybe even violence. What I got was silence. The same silence they had forced upon me. But this time, it was mine. Mine to fill. Mine to own. And for the first time in years, I did not feel like a ghost in this house. I felt like the homeowner. Because I was. And I still am. The next morning, I made breakfast as usual. I cracked the eggs gently, fried them in butter the way James liked when he was 10. I made toast, spread it with jam. The coffee was hot. The table was set. It looked like any other Tuesday. But beside each plate, I placed something new, a white envelope. Inside each one, the letter I had printed the night before, along with the financial records and stills from the hidden cameras. Amanda was the first to enter the kitchen. Her hair was tied back, face washed, robe cinched a little too tight. She looked at the envelope, then at me. What's this? She asked. Breakfast, I said calmly. James came in next, yawning. He grumbled something about needing coffee, then picked up the envelope. He opened it, squinted at the first page, and started flipping through. I watched his face change, from confusion to recognition, then disbelief, then the flush of anger. What the hell is this? Amanda had gone pale. She was reading faster now, her eyes darting across the printout. The silence was thick enough to chew. James slammed the envelope down on the table. You don't have the right. This is our house, too. We've lived here for 7 years. I poured myself a cup of coffee. Your father and I lived here for 43, I said. We paid for every shingle, every tile, and when he passed, the deed went to me, alone, legally, quietly, permanently. James stood up so fast his chair toppled over. You're kicking us out? Is that what this is? I took a sip, then nodded toward the door. It's 8:59. Amanda looked at the clock. You're bluffing. You wouldn't dare. I walked to the door, opened it wide. Come see. They followed me into the front hallway, where I turned the deadbolt with a satisfying click and pulled it open. The 2 suitcases sat neatly at the edge of the porch, side by side like silent witnesses. Amanda gasped. James stepped outside and shouted, You can't throw us out! We have kids! You think this is some game? I walked past him, picked up the first suitcase, and heaved it down the steps. It bounced once, landed hard. The second one followed. James stared in disbelief. You're insane. You're just a bitter old scrap, I interrupted, looking him in the eye. You want to know what's trash? He stopped. I stepped forward, voice calm and low. Trash is what grows up in a mother's house, eats her food, uses her heat, sleeps under her roof, and then spits on her hand when she's too tired to keep waving it in their face. Amanda turned back toward the doorway. You'll regret this. I smiled. No, for the first time in years, I won't. Behind them, Emma appeared at the door, still in her pajamas, holding her phone. The other 2 children peeked from behind her. I looked at them, my grandchildren, and said nothing. Because sometimes silence is the only inheritance worth passing down. James stepped toward me, aggressive now. You think this is over? You think you won? I reached into my cardigan pocket and held up a small brass key. The spare. I let it fall to the ground at his feet. I changed the locks at 6 a.m. Then I turned, walked back inside, and shut the door. The new lock clicked with a sound that felt like a lifetime exhaling. I leaned my back against the wood, closed my eyes. Outside they yelled. Amanda threatened lawyers. James swore. The kids cried. I walked back to the kitchen, picked up my coffee, and sat down. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just listened. And for the first time in years, the silence in this house didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like peace. The house was quiet again, but not in the way it had been after Robert died. This quiet did not ache. It hummed gently, like the sound of something healing. I opened the windows and let the wind sweep through every room. The stale air, the residue of bitterness and manipulation, it lifted like dust from old drapes. The next morning, I started with the garden. The rose bush Robert planted for our 25th anniversary had been hacked down last spring. Amanda said it was too much maintenance. I dug up the soil where it used to stand, laid new fertilizer, and planted 3 rose bushes in its place, one for every decade of love I had survived, even after he was gone. I painted the mailbox, repaired the kitchen faucet, replaced the burnt-out porch light. I did it all myself. My hands ached at night, but the ache was honest. It came from labor, not from humiliation. On the 3rd day, I pulled out the old wedding portrait, the one Amanda had taken down and stuffed in the hall closet. Robert stood in his navy suit, his tie crooked as always. I wore a simple white dress, my hair swept to one side. A pearl pin my mother had given me, tucked above my ear. I hung it back on the hallway wall. Centered, visible, unapologetic. At night, I stopped checking over my shoulder. I no longer heard doors slamming or footsteps thudding past my room at midnight. No more muttering from the hallway. No more whispering in the dark from children I raised to believe in decency. Instead, I turned on the old radio in the living room, an antique Robert had restored in the ADS. It crackled, it hummed. And sometimes it played old jazz stations that still remembered Ella Fitzgerald. I danced once, just a slow shuffle from one end of the rug to the other. My slippers didn't glide like they used to, but I moved anyway. And I smiled. The silence here was sacred now. Not forced, not suffocating, just mine. One morning I sat down at the kitchen table with a sheet of lined paper and my favorite pen, the blue one I used for grocery lists and birthday cards. I wrote a letter. It began simply, "To whom it may concern, at the Nevada Women's Alliance for Senior Protection, my name is not important, but what I have lived through is..." I told them the story, piece by piece. Not to ask for help, not to seek pity, but to testify. I wrote about the subtle silencing, the fake smiles, the cruel whispers, about how easy it is for a mother to go from loved to used, how kindness becomes currency and presence becomes debt. I wrote until my hand cramped. At the bottom, I signed my name. Then I crossed it out, and beneath it I wrote, "Formerly known the trash," and mailed it. It was late autumn when Charles arrived. I had listed the spare bedroom on a site that catered to retirees looking for temporary stays, visiting family, recovering from surgeries, or just seeking a change of scenery. I was not expecting anything to come from it, but one morning, there it was, a reservation. 3 nights. Charles, age 72, retired firefighter, widower. He arrived with a modest suitcase and a small cooler filled with homemade chili. Said it was his late wife's recipe, and he hadn't figured out how to cook anything else worth feeding another soul. I liked him immediately. Charles was tall, soft-spoken, and had the kind of hands that told stories. Scarred, steady, respectful. He looked at everything in my house as if it had a name. We spoke little the first evening, just exchanged the basics. I made tea. He cleaned his dishes without being asked. On the second night, we sat out on the porch while the sun dipped below the cottonwood trees. The air was cool, but not cruel. He asked if I lived alone. I nodded. "My son and his family used to live here," I said. "They've moved on." He didn't ask why. Instead, he shared quietly. "My wife passed 20 years ago. Breast cancer. She fought hard." I listened. "My daughter was 17 then. When I started seeing someone 2 years after, she called it betrayal. Said I was disrespecting her mother's memory, that I was selfish. She left. Never called again." I didn't say anything right away. Then I looked at him and said, "Maybe we've just lived long enough to outlast our children's gratitude." He laughed, a short, surprised sound. "I've never heard it put like that," he said. "Well," I smiled, "you're not the only one who's been taught that love has an expiration date." The next afternoon I served lemon cake and tea in the garden. The roses were finally blooming again, 3 bushes, all red, stubborn and radiant. Charles leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and said, "It's been a long time since I sat somewhere quiet. Really quiet. Not just no traffic quiet. I mean, peace." "Hard-earned," I replied. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he asked, "May I take you dancing, ma'am?" The question hung in the air, full of gentleness and bravery. I looked at him, then at the garden, at the house I had reclaimed inch by inch, and I said the words I never thought I would be brave enough to say. "This time, I don't have to ask anyone's permission That night, I sat at the kitchen table again. Same chair, same pen, same lined paper. But this time, I wrote not to remember. I wrote to remind. To the Nevada Women's Alliance, I began. You don't know me, but I wrote to you once. A letter signed, formerly known as trash. This is my second letter. In case no one's told you, we matter. The old, the worn, the quiet, the cast aside, we matter. We are not garbage waiting for disposal. Even trash has value in the right hands, but rot? Rot lives in those who forget who gave them life. Let this house be proof. Let these roses be proof. And if you need a witness, you'll find me on the dance floor. Sincerely, a woman who forgot how to be afraid. I sealed it, placed it in the mailbox, and turned off the porch light. Charles was waiting in the hallway with an old CD player in one hand and 2 cups of cocoa in the other. Ready? He asked. I took his hand, and for the first time in my life I felt weightless, not because I was being lifted, but because I had finally put everything down. It was late autumn when Charles arrived. I had listed the spare bedroom on a site that catered to retirees looking for temporary stays, visiting family, recovering from surgeries, or just seeking a change of scenery. I was not expecting anything to come from it, but one morning, there it was. A reservation. 3 nights. Charles, age 72, retired firefighter, widower. He arrived with a modest suitcase and a small cooler filled with homemade chili. Said it was his late wife's recipe, and he hadn't figured out how to cook anything else worth feeding another soul. I liked him immediately. Charles was tall, soft-spoken, and had the kind of hands that told stories. Scarred, steady, respectful. He looked at everything in my house as if it had a name. We spoke little the first evening, just exchanged the basics. I made tea. He cleaned his dishes without being asked. On the second night, we sat out on the porch while the sun dipped below the cottonwood trees. The air was cool but not cruel. He asked if I lived alone. I nodded. My son and his family used to live here, I said. They've moved on. He didn't ask why. Instead, he shared quietly. My wife passed 20 years ago, breast cancer. She fought hard. I listened. My daughter was 17 then. When I started seeing someone 2 years after, she called it betrayal. Said I was disrespecting her mother's memory, that I was selfish. She left, never called again. I didn't say anything right away. Then I looked at him and said, maybe we've just lived long enough to outlast our children's gratitude. He laughed, a short, surprised sound. I've never heard it put like that, he said. Well, I smiled, you're not the only one who's been taught that love has an expiration date. The next afternoon, I served lemon cake and tea in the garden. The roses were finally blooming again, 3 bushes, all red, stubborn and radiant. Charles leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes and said, it's been a long time since I sat somewhere quiet. Really quiet. Not just no traffic quiet. I mean, peace. Hard-earned, I replied. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he asked, may I take you dancing, ma'am? The question hung in the air, full of gentleness and bravery. I looked at him, then at the garden, at the house I had reclaimed, inch by inch, and I said the words I never thought I would be brave enough to say. This time, I don't have to ask anyone's permission. That night, I sat at the kitchen table again. Same chair, same pen, same lined paper, but this time I wrote, not to remember. I wrote to remind. To the Nevada Women's Alliance, I began. You don't know me, but I wrote to you once. A letter signed, formerly known as trash. This is my second letter. In case no one's told you, we matter. The old, the worn, the quiet, the cast aside. We matter. We are not garbage waiting for disposal. Even trash has value in the right hands. But rot? Rot lives in those who forget who gave them life. Let this house be proof. Let these roses be proof. And if you need a witness, you'll find me on the dance floor. Sincerely, a woman who forgot how to be afraid. I sealed it, placed it in the mailbox, and turned off the porch light. Charles was waiting in the hallway, with an old CD player in one hand and 2 cups of cocoa in the other. Ready? He asked. I took his hand, and for the first time in my life I felt weightless. Not because I was being lifted, but because I had finally put everything down